Welcome to Back to the Text Themselves, a series on phenomenology. Today's video examines Chapter 3, Part C, Sections 22 to 24 of Heidegger's Being and Time. What do we mean when we say we feel a distance growing between ourselves and another, or when we ask for a little space to think about things for a bit? How is it at times we can feel closer to someone physically distant than to someone living in our own homes? Such expressions of space are thought to be derivative of physical distances. However, what if these everyday expressions of space are, in fact, more fundamental than the objective distances we can measure? Heidegger makes such a case that space is first and foremost a relation between us and the things of the world, while physical distances are merely derivative of this more primordial mode of relatedness. Though this understanding of space is not reducible to objectivity, nor is it purely subjective, Dasein discovers its spatiality in and through a world that is always already there. As such, spatiality is a term of relationship between the internal and external, and not merely a subjective interpretation or objective measurement of reality. In this video, I address the following questions. How is the spatiality of interworldly things characterized? 2. How is being in the world marked by a de-distancing and directionality? 3. What does it mean to make space for something? This channel addresses works of philosophy and psychoanalysis. Each video, structured by 3 questions, analyzes a small section as we gradually move through an entire text. To support this work, please consider liking and sharing this video and subscribing to my channel. You can also support this work on Patreon. The link is below in the description. There are 3 characteristics I'll address: nearness, region, and aroundness. First, things that are ready to hand have the characteristic of nearness, which is already suggested by the term readiness to hand. This nearness does not concern objective presence in physical space. Rather, it concerns a kind of relationship between Dasein and things. When Dasein is concerned about things, those things are near to us. Whereas when they fail to concern us, such as the electronics behind the screen you're now watching, they're remote. Second, interworldly things at hand belong to a region. A region is the place where things gain their usefulness. That place is, in fact, a totality of interconnected places, providing the context for a thing's relevance. Regions precede and are interwoven with the use of a thing. Dasein takes these regions into account in the taking care of handy things. Heidegger provides the example of the sun's light and warmth, which is discovered in the changing locations of its usability, which depends upon the time of day, the sunrise, noon, sunset, midnight. Its use is further elaborated upon by Dasein in a variety of manners, such as the design of churches and graves, which are made according to the orientation of the rising and setting of the sun. All the equipment I need to film this video are located at my home office. This home office contains not only a recording device and lights, but also the plugs I need to power those devices. Though technically I can create this video anywhere, this is the only location in my home where I can record without noisy interruptions. And so this office represents the region by which my recording equipment finds its usefulness for me. Dasein's heedful dealings in being concerned about and in taking care of things discovers these regions in their relevance. Third, the region of a nearby thing constitutes its aroundness. Aroundness concerns the relative locations within a given region in which interworldly things disclose their usefulness to me. The above, below, behind, and before is a dimensionality of this disclosed space. To continue with my previous example, the usefulness of the video recorder depends upon navigating the region in which I encounter it. My camera is located on top of my desk. Plugs and other wires function best under the table. To charge my microphone requires going underneath my table to grab the wire and connect it. I must maintain a certain proximity so the microphone can reach me where I am without having to get too close to the camera. This might all seem rather obvious and uninteresting to many ears, but take a moment to consider the purpose of this analysis. We're not describing this situation merely in its mundane reality, but are elevating a dimension of it to the status of fundamental ontology, a place often assumed to be held by science. Yet the scientific measurement of physical reality is itself dependent upon a prior understanding of what it means to be in space at all. If I'm not already in a world where notions of nearness and distance are available to me in some manner, then it would not occur to me to apply an instrument to measure a certain dimension of that space for the sake of some other purpose. None of this dispels the importance or contribution of science, but it requires acknowledging that the entire scope of its knowledge depends on something more fundamental than what its investigations yield. So to conclude, nearness is about a relational proximity to things. A region is a referential location by which things acquire their meaning. And aroundness is the directionality open to me whereby I can move in relation to useful things. What Heidegger describes here is a conception of spatiality specific to innerworldly things. This spatiality is encountered ontologically because spatiality is also a characteristic of Dasein. So we'll next take up Dasein and its spatiality. Dasein is in the world in a manner that's not like an object inside a box. The manner of being in the world for Dasein is expressed in its familiarity and heedful dealings with the things encountered within the surrounding world. As mentioned already, it's a space defined by a certain relationality. Two manners in which Dasein navigates this spatiality is de-distancing and directionality. De-distancing is essentially what Dasein is. Dasein is that being that lets things be encountered by removing the remoteness between oneself and those things. De-distancing is not about getting physically closer to an object. Rather, it's more like when I say, I'm getting closer to making a decision, or I have a long way to go before that will be possible for me. Sometimes this kind of movement within space isn't obvious to us until we visit another culture and engage in a different language than our native one. For example, when I'm in Colombia, South America, and someone mentions about running errands, or if I say I'm going to run an errand, I might say, me toca hacer unas vueltas por la mañana, meaning I got to run some errands this morning. Hacer unas vueltas literally means going in circles or laps, but in Heidegger's terms, we might think of it as a manner of drawing near to things ready to hand so they may be used for the sake of those errands. Dasein continues to bring about this de-distancing in new ways. Heidegger mentions the example of the radio, though in today's world of the internet, the degree of de-distancing has expanded in a manner unlike any other time in human history. Just the fact that there may be others right now watching this from halfway around the world is a kind of de-distancing not possible only a few decades ago. And so this raises an interesting question concerning the notion of social distancing that we've all been encountering during this time of the pandemic, and what it means for us in light of Heidegger's notion of de-distancing. In one sense, we have had to increase the physical distance between us, and in previous times this might have made others more remote. But then we read about or hear news stories of how it's more difficult than ever, for example, to separate work and home life. So in a sense, social distancing has at the same time led to a more profound de-distancing of our work environments and our colleagues. It should be noted that Heidegger makes no evaluative judgment upon the notion of de-distancing. It can be either positive or negative. Along with de-distancing, Dasein is also characterized by directionality. De-distancing entails a directionality in bringing something near. Circumspect heedfulness guides this directional de-distancing. And this directionality concerns the body of Dasein as well. Sometimes Heidegger is critiqued for not addressing the role of the body as much as perhaps he should have, but it certainly does come up, such as here. Certain useful things draw near in the direction that conforms to the demands of the body. A pair of gloves, for example, must be oriented toward the right and left, whereas a hammer need not be oriented in such a way, but only oriented toward the hand as such. This directedness toward the right or left is grounded in the fundamental directionality of Dasein, and this characteristic of Dasein is determined by the fact that Dasein is a being that resides in a world. If you're wondering what the difference is between aroundness and directionality, my understanding is that aroundness is a characteristic of interworldly things as they exist within a region of space. Directionality is a characteristic of Dasein as it exists in a world. Of course, the two come together in an inseparable manner as Dasein concerns itself with these useful things. The de-distancing of things entails giving space or making room for the encounter with such interworldly beings. It's a lending oneself to be available to the thing at hand, sort of like opening up a spot on your schedule for meeting with someone. One clears their schedule like one makes space for the de-distancing of things as they draw near. Dasein is the kind of being that makes space for other beings. It is a being that de-distances and directs itself toward things. All of this describes who Dasein is and forms an existential a priori that marks a dimension of fundamental ontology. And so this concludes chapter 3, which has demonstrated how the world is in a primordial relationship with Dasein. Heidegger refutes the classic binary of subject and object, as well as the reduction of the world and the beings within it to mere objects and measurable distances. To exist in a world is to already be in relationship with that world, a world that makes meaningful the things within it. Doing so also shows how Dasein is not a worldless subject like the cogito of Descartes, but finds itself always already in the world. Now, what about when we encounter not only things, but others? Other Daseins who interact with their world in a manner like me? That will be the topic of the next video as we consider the notion of being with others, as well as the concept of the they. I'd like to thank the following for supporting this channel on Patreon. Again, you can become a Patreon supporter by following the link down below in the description. As always, thank you for watching, and until next time, be well.